And action. Marie had a question about how to wean off of a PPI. PPI stands for proton pump inhibitor. And usually when patients have reflux, acid, problems with cough, anything that relates to the stomach coming up, or the acid coming up from the stomach, and see my other tutorial, DrRic tutorial, GERD, G-E-R-D, and I have a full explanation on that stuff. But when you have symptoms that break through and become very disruptive, well, usually doctors will give you PPIs or things to turn off the acid. It used to be that we would use Tagamet, Pepcid, and Zantac, and they were usually pretty good. At one point in time, Tagamet, I think, was the biggest prescription that was sold in the world. So we had problems in the 80s, and we have problems again. But I think it's because of diet and stress and eating big meals at night. We're not supposed to do all that stuff. The old ancient healing systems of Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine always say don't eat anything, usually within 4 hours of going to sleep or lying down, because the stomach has a good muscle that keeps everything down. But if you lie flat, that muscle is being constantly bombarded with food coming up. So eventually it fails. And stress also decreases that stomach mucus layer. Mucus is supposed to line the stomach so it can protect itself from its own acid. So usually what happens is you chew food properly, it goes down into your esophagus, it gets into the belly. Once it gets into the stomach, then the stomach secretes acid and a whole bunch of other hormones to the rest of the body, but the acid breaks down most proteins, most solid material into essentially vomit. When things turn slimy, from solid to slimy, essentially your stomach acts as a smoothie generator or a smoothie mixture. And once it gets to that consistency, then it can go down from the stomach into the small intestine and get absorbed properly. When the stomach is making too much acid and there's not enough food, or the acid mixture is too strong, it'll kick back up into the esophagus and burn the lining. And that's what causes the burning or the acid reflux. When the lining is burnt and the muscle can't close tight anymore, it actually stays open, and then more acid churns and kicks up into the esophagus. So it burns more esophagus, making it a bigger, wider opening, and it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be nice and tight. So the problem is when it occurs, we're supposed to say for the short time, okay, stop the suffering, get on an acid blocker. I would always go with Pepcid, Zantac, and Tagamet. Those are H2 blockers. There's a receptor in the stomach lining and in the cell that secretes acid, and it's related to hydrochloric acid. But anyway, the H2 blockers will do their job, but if you want to go for the big gusto, you can turn off everything, acid, every other hormone that's secreted, and you'll have the reflux go away, but you need acid to digest food. You need acid to cleave B12 out. So the problem would be if you take the acid blocker, and it's the most important one, the biggest one, you just nuked the stomach from acid, but now that stomach is supposed to digest food. How can it do that if it has a 24-hour acting acid blocker in the system? It can't. And that's why usually you have to worry about B12 deficiency or malabsorption, because food doesn't break down. The stomach will try as a muscle to churn, but it won't do that great of a job. It's like chewing food with no teeth. So the problem will occur that eventually B12 and protein won't get absorbed, and other things too. But more importantly, the stomach has this sensitivity and gets used to having no acid around. So when you stop that PPI, that's Prevacid, Omeprazole, Prilosec, Protonix, Acid, when you stop all that stuff, usually there's a massive wave of acid that comes back in, and then you're screwed. And then you have the symptoms again, and you start the medicine again. So you can see how it becomes addictive to have that medicine. So the objective, I think, is to, number one, change diet, change diet, and then change your stress, or the way you tolerate stress. So changing diet usually means, as if you, and I have it pointed out in my other video, staying away from chocolate, staying away from tomatoes, staying away from high spicy foods, sometimes peppermint, anything with caffeine, any coffee bean, even if it's decaf free or decaf, even alcohol, anything that's irritating, citric acid in the morning. So if you take any of that stuff, you really have to stop for a short time, 6 weeks. And you might even notice a little bit of weight loss too. But if you do the 6 weeks thing, then you don't have those foods that cause irritation. You'll have them out of the system. you'll have to do a calming practice or relax or work on stress, because stress was the first thing stress does. It turns off the digestive tract, because if you're going to be on fight or flight, your gut's not going to be getting all the energy to digest. Your gut's going to be not getting energy at all. All your energy is going to be going to your heart and your muscle. So gut, it's not supposed to digest. You can't secrete mucus. It gets all screwed up. So if you have a pleasant love reaction and some form of meditative practice or mindful practice, it actually turns on serotonin, and it has parasympathetic stimulation to the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve goes all the way down even to the rectum, from the esophagus to the stomach to the small intestine to the large intestine to the rectum. And it gives a lot of neural input, a lot of nerve input to the entire digestive tract, and has it work better, coordinates better, secretes all its acids and mucus better. So, but that takes time. So if you can't withdraw, then forget it. Just stay on the medicine, but that's going to be a long amount of medicine. And sometimes you'll see the conspiracy theories about how proton pump inhibitors also increase chances for pancreatic cancer and osteoporosis and a couple other things. I'm not sure they're really backed up with legitimate randomized controlled double-blind trials, but I would try to get off the medicine. Again, we didn't have that medicine before. We just relied on H2 blockers, which is the other next step. If you're going to try to get off of those medicines, do the diet thing, do the relaxation practice, and then plan to wean off slowly. You can do alternating doses of proton pump inhibitor on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then H2 blocker, that's Tagamet, Pepcid, Zantac, on Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday for like 2 weeks. Get the body used to not having it every other day. And then you do full Tagamet, Zantac, Pepcid every day, maybe twice a day when you eliminate that PPI completely for about 2 weeks. Then you go to once a day for 2 weeks, and then you use it as necessary. I think that's a nice weaning process. In addition, if you're a smoker, I would always use Carafate. There's a big horse tablet that of fluid that it's essentially you swallow it and it coats the stomach with this mucus, fake mucus. Smokers tend to have, oh, that's the other thing, you should stop smoking if you're a smoker. Smokers tend to have less mucus protecting their stomach and still a whole bunch of acid. So in addition, there's something called DGL, and DGL you can get chewable. If you don't like licorice, you might not like it because it tastes like black licorice. It actually is licorice, but it has a process it goes through where it takes out the portion that gives you high blood pressure. So if you do DGL, you mix it up, you chew it, you mix it up with your saliva, then you swallow it, and it coats your stomach as well, because the Carafate sometimes is not covered by insurance. DGL, 10 minutes before every meal would be helpful to protect the lining of your stomach, in addition to taking it at night. You can get that at any vitamin shop, GNC, Fruitful Yield, or Whole Foods, or you can get it online. And usually that will keep you honest and keep you protected as far as coating the stomach. Also helps with adrenal insufficiency. Do that for about 2 months after stopping the PPI, and hopefully you'll be okay. But as far as restarting all those bad foods, well, they probably got you into the reflux issues, so if you're getting older, I would try to avoid them. And it is tough, but you have to try to make the change, and hopefully you'll stay away from having to need anything chronically.